Between the hustle and bustle of our daily lives, the day job, the errands, the traffic, the barely funny sitcoms, we can forget what it's like to be in awe. And sometimes it only takes one thing to remind you. And today we're talking about a place that awed an entire nation. Hi, my name is Gabe Bauer, and this is Top Shelf History, where we combine great stories with great drinks. This is the Great Geyser. It is the cocktail I've made for you today based on Yellowstone, the first ever national park. Now, this cocktail is made with blue Curacao, rum, gin, and sweet and sour mix, and it is designed to look like one of those stunningly colorful pools of water and minerals that litter throughout the landscape of that volcanic topography. Now, Yellowstone is a natural marvel. The prismatic hues of the mineral pools and lakes that enchant the eye, the American bison which majestically roams across the lands, the warm and soft, pungent smell of sulfur that emanates from the vapors in the ground. It is truly a sight and an experience to behold, especially for those who visit it in person. Now, Yellowstone is located in the northwestern part of Wyoming, the southeastern part of Idaho, and the southwestern region of Montana. It's one of the largest national parks in all of America and probably even the world. But that's just above ground. Underneath lies one of the most imposing and terrifying supervolcanoes as well. But let's not focus too much on that. This world is so enchanting that at one time people didn't even believe that it existed. So what changed? In 1871, two gentlemen, Thomas Moran, an artist and painter, and William Henry Jackson, a photographer, went exploring in the West, and they came across what would today be known as Yellowstone National Park. Their paintings and photos gave evidence to the beauty and finally showed that this enchanted, mystical world that everybody had heard about in the West truly existed. President Ulysses S. Grant even worked alongside Congress to help protect the land by passing the Yellowstone National Park Protection Act in 1871, forever making it the first national park in the world, ever. Seeing the photos and renderings of the park, visitors immediately flocked to the new national park, and they've been doing so ever since, including me. I've seen Yellowstone up close and personal, and let me tell you, it is truly remarkable. And if you ever forget how powerful nature can be, well, Old Faithful, the most famous geyser in the park, will erupt every 74 minutes or so, just to remind you. Now, Yellowstone's beauty can only be matched by its legacy. It's been 150 years since Yellowstone became the world's first ever national park, and since then, the national park system has grown to preserve 60 other gorgeous swaths of land. And around the world, there are now over 1,800 national parks. And that's not even including preservations and conservatories. It's truly remarkable. Helen of Troy's beauty launched 1,000 ships, but Yellowstone's beauty launched an entire revolution. Man, I love national parks. And you know when I love something, I gotta make a drink inspired by it. So let's get into our drink, the Great Geyser. Now, my whole inspiration for creating this drink was to focus on the volcanic topography that's so famous throughout Yellowstone, particularly the prismatic pools that you see littered throughout the landscape. And I remember looking at the photos that I had and also some other photos online and as a reference, and I think I came up with something that's relatively close. So for that, we're going to start out with our glass here, and we will begin by pouring in 1.5 ounces of sweet and sour mix. Now, this is sweet and sour mix that I made at home, but any sweet and sour mix will go well. The only, I guess you could say, positive to making your own is that you can make it more tart than necessarily store-bought. There's a little bit more customization there, but let's start. So 1.5 ounces of our sweet and sour mix. Add a nice little base. And then we'll follow that up with 2 ounces of blue Curacao. And this will work well since Curacao is practically a triple sec, so that's going to be a citrus-based liquor, and the color will be really, really beautiful. Really look like those deep, dark blue pools that you'll see when you look them up online. I mean, look at that. That's already gorgeous. Next, we will follow that up by floating our last 2 colors and liquors. Now, here I'm going to use some yellow dyed rum. Now, rum is 40% liquor, or I should say alcohol. Blue Curacao is around 24%, and as a reminder, whenever you're floating something, the higher the alcohol, the easier it is to float. So that's our reasoning here. I'm using Bacardi with this one. I just dyed it yellow. So, and I'm putting it in a squeeze bottle to help me float it. Now I just have to get my spoon here, and we're going to put our spoon face up on the side so that we get a good surface area. And we'll just start pouring this out. Now we're gonna need a decent amount of liquor to create a good layer here. And if you don't want to put in too much, then I would suggest diluting your rum a little bit with water. That's what I've done here. That way you get more liquid to create the artistic effect while at the same time not getting drunk off of 2 sips. Important note. I don't know. You do you though, responsibly. And then for our second layer, we're going to use our orange gin. Now, the reason why I chose yellow and orange for our next floating looks here is that when you look at the prismatic pools, you see the first layer in between that blue is going to be a yellowish hue, which is kind of sulfuric and beautiful in its own way. And then you see the orange comes out, and it's almost like tendrils of lava that's, you know, spreading forth from the blue hole. But these aren't actually really lava, they're mostly minerals and bacteria that's living nearby. Some of them are actually heat lovers. I can't remember the scientific name, but for our gin, we're using Bombay because Bombay is 47%, so that'll make it easier to float on top of the Bacardi. And like I said, dyed it orange. Once more, if you don't want as much alcohol, dilute it with water because we're gonna want a good layer to distinguish our colors here. We're just gonna float this ever so carefully. Now, this is a lot like a Pousse Café. If you ever did a Pousse Café glass or cocktail, they're all layered. It's kind of the origin of it. So we're just gonna try to mimic that look. Now, at first they may look like that they actually merged into one layer, and that's okay because as you give it some time, they'll clearly separate as well. But there we have, you can see there are 3 fairly distinct layers. You got the orange on top, you've got the yellow just underneath, and you've got that beautiful glacial blue right underneath. It is a pool of prismatic beauty, and something that actually honestly reminds me of what I was able to see at Yellowstone. And if you look up the pictures, hopefully you'll agree. But before we call this a drink, we need to not forget what is perhaps the most famous part of Yellowstone, and that is the geysers. So let's grab some dry ice and pop it in to mimic some of the geysers. Forgive my speech there. Now, dry ice is safe to use in your cocktails as long as you let it sublimate entirely, or in other words, dissipate entirely, because dry ice is so cold that it will burn you if it touches your bare skin, or it will cause frostbite. It's pretty dangerous stuff if you're handling it just bare skin on. You also don't want to, you know, inhale any of the vapors that's coming out of it. That's pure carbon dioxide, so you could suffocate. It sounds more dangerous than it is. Trust me, it's gonna look really cool. So 1 second while I grab mine. We have our dry ice. Look at that, it's already smoking. Let's drop it in and turn this into a geyser. Oh yeah, does that not look awesome? Now this is gonna bubble up a little bit for some time. I mean, it's got to sublimate entirely off, so it's just going to evaporate before our very eyes. But look at that. Does that not look incredible? It looks majestic. It looks like a geyser. Honestly, from what I remember, it really does look like a geyser. And what's great too is that while this is doing all of the bubbling, it's also doing us the added bonus of mixing our glass at the same time. So when this is finished, all of your ingredients will mix together and it will leave us with a gorgeous, gorgeous glacial blue liquor drink thing, if you want to call it. But it will be beautiful. So I'm going to let this boil off, because also another added bonus of using dry ice, as you let it boil off, I guess you could say, it's also chilling down the glass immensely. So I'm using room temperature liquor, but I guarantee you by the time that I actually have this, it's going to be chilled. So we're going to cut to when this is finished, and then we will try it. Ready? And there we have it. And now look at that. All of our dry ice has sublimated or boiled off essentially, but it has wonderfully cooled down our drink, and it has also mixed our drink. We have this beautiful turquoise, blue, green, just glacial water look. And it's not as green as it could be, but that's just because we have a good amount of yellow and orange in there. So if you want to make it even more glacial look, just tone down the amount of food coloring that you put in your layers. But otherwise, it looks fantastic. And let's see if it tastes as good. Yep. You know, there is something that is just so special about the combination of rum and gin and triple sec and sweet and sour mix. They just play so well together, because rum is sweet, right? You know, rum is typically made from sugar cane, so you're gonna have that delicious sweetness, especially if it's white rum or not spice rum. You know, you don't have any competing flavors. You get the juniper though of gin, and dry gin specifically, we used Bombay Sapphire. Oh, fantastic. It's delicious. You know, you get a little bit of dryness that will go well with the citrus, and at the same time you get the nice juniper flavor that's very bright and very light on the system. Then you have the sweet delicacy that is blue curacao. I mean, come on, triple sec. It's orange, it's citrusy, it's blue. It's awesome. And then with the sweet and sour mix, you get the right amount of tart in there that just kind of cuts through all the sweetness. So well balanced flavor-wise, and honestly, it's just so pretty to look at. I would build a house on this lake right here and just look out on the waves. Maybe throw in some dry ice just to make it a little bit more interesting on some days. But there you have it, the Great Geyser. And that sounds like last call. So one of my favorite animals, if not my favorite animal of all time, is the American bison. And why? Because, I don't know, there's just something about the way that they look, the way that they act. It's just so cool. And plus the fact that I'm American and they're American, they just, there's just so much love there. And when I was in Yellowstone, I was able to see my first ever bison in person. And what's also quite incredible about Yellowstone in regards to bison is that it is the only place in the lower 48 states where you can see bison roaming freely on public land. There is currently 2 specific, I guess you could say, herds of bison that exist in Yellowstone, comprising around nearly 5,000 individuals in total between the 2 herds. And Yellowstone served as a great refuge for the bison in times that all of the bison were hunted down nearly to extinction. There were millions. I think it was upwards of nearly 60 million at the time of the first hunts being made as Manifest Destiny pushed the Americans west. They ended up hunting down a lot of bison for mostly the reason was to kind of starve out most of the native populations. One of the more darker moments, I guess you could say, in American history. And Yellowstone is also one of the few places where, from prehistoric times, bison have always existed. And even today, you can see the naturally wild tendencies of these herds. And it's just remarkable to see that not only was Yellowstone able to preserve its natural beauty in terms of the landscape, but also in terms of the wildlife. I mean, the bison there are huge, and it's so cool to see so many of them. They just hang out, and they're mostly actually kept warm because the soil itself is actually kept fairly warm due to the volcano that lies underneath. And if you want to see some pictures, check out our after hours, because I got a couple pictures of when I was passing bison when I was in Yellowstone, and I almost became a schoolgirl when I saw it. So just saying, I was really excited. But anyway, fantastic to find out about, and man, bison, what animals. Yellowstone, what a park. Thank you all so much for watching. If you'd like to learn more about my experiences at Yellowstone and even see some really cool pictures, then you can check out our after hours at topshelfhistory.com. That's specifically for our premium members. But if you also want to check out any of our other historically inspired cocktails, you can find them here. You can also find them at our website at topshelfhistory.com. From all of us here at Top Shelf History, remember, history is better with a drink. Cheers.